Good morning, everyone. This is Brian Fox with 18F here at GSA. Thanks so much for joining the DevOps Community of Practice event this afternoon. We're going to get going in just another minute. Folks are still joining. All right, everyone, thanks for joining this morning, or excuse me, this afternoon. My name is Brian Fox. I'm with 18F, and along with Alex, we're both from GSA within the Technology and Transformation Services within that group. I work at 18F, and thank you all for joining us today. Thanks for your time, and thanks mostly for Kevin coming in from HUD's REAC. He's going to be talking to us today about their implementation of Agile and DevOps, both the processes, tools, and the philosophies there. So it'll be interesting for us to see what they are working on. Just a little bit though, because this is our first event, just to describe what we're hoping to do here. Really the concept around this DevOps community of practice is really all about sharing what folks are working on, accomplishing, and learning as they apply DevOps, Agile, cloud-based tools to allow Agile processes to work a heck of a lot faster. So that's the goal. And with this, what you'll see today is Kevin opening up and sharing what they're doing there at HUD. In future events, you'll see content that's either technical or kind of management in focus. Management related, because both aspects are important, whether it's change management, how folks are managing their work, going from waterfall methodologies towards more Agile or DevOps methods, as well as the technical aspects that are associated with how do you accomplish that, especially within the constraints, policy or compliance of government. So there's plenty for us to share across the board. And oftentimes in agencies or departments or bureaus, entities can be learning on their own. So we believe there's immense value in just getting us to open up, all of us across government, to share what's working, what we've learned, and how we're succeeding. For this particular event, if you have questions for Kevin, go ahead and put it in the chat, because Kevin's going to present for about 15 minutes, and we hope to have about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for a bit of Q&A, and the questions in chat will really drive that. So if you have any questions for him, please do that. But all of this is going to be time blocked to just 30 minutes, and so there will likely be questions we can't get to, but the listservs are an opportunity to continue the conversation between the actual events, so please use those. Don't forget, we also have a web presence out there on digital.gov. And last but not least, I'd like to ask you all that we're going to need future presentations. Kevin was brave enough to be the first in the pipeline here, but I'd love for you all to present on what you all are working on, what's worked, and what you've learned in the process. And after the event, there'll also be a survey coming out, so you can expect that just to get feedback, because this event will be whatever it needs to be for us. So it may tweak a bit just to meet our needs. So, and the survey will help with that. Alex, anything from kind of a logistics or communication standpoint?
That sounds great, Brian. Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, so folks, as Brian mentioned, great place for conversation is the listservs. We also have a web presence on digital.gov. And just to repeat again, please remember to stay on mute and direct all of your questions to the chat about Kevin's presentation. Brian will be collecting those questions, and then, as he mentioned, having a bit of a Q&A with Kevin afterward. So I think that's it for me. Brian, I will turn it back over to you.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Well, without further ado, Kevin Portanova from HUD's REAC is going to be presenting. Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Brian. And good afternoon, everybody, or good morning if it's still morning where you are. Again, so my name is Kevin Portanova. I'm with the Real Estate Assessment Center, or REAC, here at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So we're just going to go ahead and jump into the slideshow. Typically, like all slideshows in the federal government, right? We have an agenda to go over, and it's just kind of high level. Like Brian said, we've only got like 15 minutes or so, and then some Q&A. So I just kind of wanted to give you an overview of my organization here at HUD. First and foremost, my title is Director of Information Technology at HUD, but under the Office of Public and Indian Housing in the Real Estate Assessment Center. As you can imagine, we have many silos here at HUD, and we are a program area under a program area, so it makes our situation a little unique. This is kind of us from an organizational perspective. We fall under the Housing Secretary. There's over here, you can see that in green. We're Public and Indian Housing under here. The Real Estate Assessment Center falls under PIH, yet another acronym. And so what do we do here, right? So here at a high level is our mission. It says things like provide and promote effective use of accurate, timely, and reliable information, but mostly to assess the condition of HUD's housing portfolio. I like to summarize what our organization does at a high level. About 60 to 70% of our focus is either the physical or financial assessment of that condition of that portfolio, right? So physically, we actually have HUD staff as well as contractors that go out and assess condition of property, right? So is it, is it safe and sanitary, as well as the financial condition of the unit that's managing that portfolio. As you can imagine from an IT perspective, we support all of those systems and subsystems to do those assessments, right? And to provide that data accurately and timely to those different business areas. At a high level, this is how my organization looks today. I'm fairly unique in the HUD realm in that I have a federal staff. So back in 2014, the then IT director and my DAS, my Deputy Assistant Secretary here at REAC, decided contracts weren't working for us, right? There had to be a better way to do software development as well as operations. And let's try to do it with some federal staff. So I actually started here at REAC in 2014. They hired me and 4 developers. Those 4 quickly grew to 10 in 2014. We hired another 10 in 2015, and then roughly another 12 to 15 the following year in 2016. So I have currently a staff of about 40 specialists, mostly in the occupational series of 2210 or IT specialists, but some other generic MIS type positions here as well. So not only do we do, as you can see on the right-hand side here, federal software development. So we're doing true Agile development here in this organization, but we're also developing software for these different business areas. But we also have a small focus on O&M, operations and maintenance, for this organization, right? So some of our legacy systems that aren't modernized yet. And then you can see a little tail there for DevOps. For us, it was an iterative process, right? Agile came first. And as we started doing some software development for this organization, we kind of realized that void between development and operations. And so we started kind of playing in that DevOps realm and trying to see what worked for us in this organization, given a lot of our constraints, right? So we started with Agile, like I said, but it was really difficult. And luckily we did this from the ground up, right? This was not a overarching CIO or HUD leadership decision saying, hey, we want you guys to do Agile and here's how you do it. This was truly me and those first 4 developers started kind of building this Agile process in our organization. And through iterations, through that different process is how we've kind of evolved, right, our Agile implementations to also include DevOps. We focus really hard here on not having component teams. So I try to have the necessary or requisite skill sets on each development team. I don't want a development team working on a piece of a project and then handing it off, for example, to a test team. and then thus passing off or shifting that responsibility, right? So we have integrated testers on all of our teams. We have a little bit of a void in our particular organization. We do some front-end development, and I don't really have anybody with a UI UX background. So that's one of our needs that we're trying to focus on right now, with hopefully, fingers crossed, some hiring this year, this fiscal year or next. CI/CD at HUD is going to be an integral piece of our DevOps implementation. Unfortunately, because I don't sit in the office of the CIO, I have limited control, right, when it comes to operations, right? So when it comes to the production level environment, as well as our CI/CD pipeline, it's built and maintained by our Office of CIO. And so I have to work in concert with their enterprise architecture division and their CI/CD pipeline. We do actually, luckily, have a really good relationship. And so thus we're able to build and kind of foster that process and help them build a truly automated CI/CD pipeline. We're hoping by next year to be able to drop code in a development environment and have it auto-populate all the way up to just before production release. The reason we have a limitation on production at this point is because our production's still back in a data center, even though we're trying to do most, if not all, of our development in HUD's Azure cloud. So it's a completely cloud infrastructure, but it's only on the development side of the house right now. We don't have a cloud implemented production solution yet. But I am working with CIO to try to help make that happen as well. It truly was, that kind of last bullet identifies a paradigm shift for this organization, right? Not just Agile, but DevOps, because traditionally developers build stuff, they hand it off, operations implements it. There really was no integration. I like to tell my team, and I have been since 2014, we use two different analogies. One, we're either driving on the road while we pave it, or we're changing the tire going 50 miles an hour. We're trying to do things, and we try different aspects. Some work, some don't, but trying to have a truly agile environment has been helping us through that process. We are constantly working with our internal teams on communication and collaboration, right? As part of the agile process, as I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar, most individuals, not all, but most individuals don't necessarily get into software development to collaborate and to work with others. They like to be in their little sandboxes. They like to be, working on a project by themselves. That's been a struggle for us a little bit. Trying to get people to understand the value, the validity in doing things like pair programming, daily stand-ups, right? Working with business more hand in hand. It's a challenge, but I think it's a worthwhile challenge because we're already seeing the fruits of our labors. I would be remiss if I didn't also mention, not everything has been roses. Configuration management, especially here at HUD, is a little rough. We still use a fairly antiquated Serena Dimensions solution for configuration management, which doesn't even allow us to do code merging. And so everything is pretty manual at this point when it gets to the production level. But like I mentioned, that CI/CD process, as we're working with enterprise architecture at CIO, we're hoping to make that more of an automated aspect of configuration management, such that we can drop some code in dev and it makes it all the way to production through some automated testing, et cetera. Also mentioned cloud adoption here. We're pushing for some AWS access as well. Currently, we only have Azure, but it is a cloud alternative. We are doing some development, as I mentioned earlier as well, in that Azure platform. And we really like it, right? So we're using technologies here that are very new for HUD, things like Git, right? Nexus and Maven, Jenkins. Jenkins is probably the only thing left over from our current production environment that's also in that cloud CI/CD solution. We do suffer from an organizational standpoint. I'd like to point out, I didn't mean lack of planning on our team necessarily, but HUD does a lot of things short-sightedly, and we're trying to work through some of those, with our partnerships and help them kind of see the value in the things that we're doing and as we move forward. Continuous monitoring is something we've been pushing for a little while. We currently have a Splunk solution, but it's mostly for just audit log tracking. We're trying to get to a point where we can do some true application monitoring in our environments and using the solutions that are available to us. So future state. I get people on my team, they push back a little bit on the Borg. I like it because resistance is futile, and I mean that in a positive way, right? So we're trying to force this organization to change. I like to tell people we're trying to bring HUD to the 20th century, not the 21st. That's probably too big of a leap for us, but if we can get us to the 20th century and update some of this technology, I have systems in REAC that have been barely maintained and haven't been updated since 2007, right? So you can imagine 10, 12 years of no updates, old, antiquated technology. Things are very brittle. They weren't developed using a lot of the, newer tools and technologies available to us today. And it does give us a lot of limitations in dealing with those organizations outside of HUD that we interact with on a day-to-day basis. Pushing for more control over our lower environments, right? So like I said, we have an Azure cloud infrastructure, but it's still maintained as if it were an on-prem brick and mortar, right, data center. Still a lot of manual processes, building, maintaining servers, even though they're virtual servers. So we're trying to get to a point where we can, self-configure, spin up, spin down servers. I have a particular system in my organization that I need 11 or 12 servers to take in audit logs from over 4,000 entities, but they only send them at about 4 to 6 month tranche a year. The rest of the year, I don't even need one server, but I have to pay for those 11 servers 12 months out of the year because of that, because of the way the environments. And we should be able to spin up and spin down those things even at a production level as needed. Pushing my team and my organization to more automated testing, right? So that's going to facilitate the CI/CD pipeline, but also make us a lot more comfortable as we're releasing code into production, right? We know that things are going to go out there, aren't going to break. We're not in a place where we do, 2 major releases a year like we used to be 3-4 years ago. We're releasing monthly, even our legacy systems, even though they're minor updates, but trying to get this entire organization to adopt that more agile, iterative mindset. And test data, something that we desperately need in our organization here internally, is that ability to have a known data set and known results, known expected results when things hit that test environment. And that's going to help also facilitate that CI/CD platform as we go forward and move forward through that entire process. So I think that's about my 15 minutes. Well, I think that's my last slide. Yep. So we'll leave that up there. I want to flop over and see if Brian, I don't know if Brian, we got any questions or anything. Anybody has any questions, follow up, anything I could add on or clarify for anybody as part of where the organization came from, what we're doing, and how we've kind of grown that agile adoption into a DevOps environment.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you. And to seed the conversation, to kind of seed this Q&A process, I've got a couple questions that are probably more related to change management than anything technical. And the first one would be, what did you do as a leader to ensure psychological safety, to get not just the folks on your team comfortable with change you might have been pushing, but to really start putting the ideas forward, whether process or the tools they wanted to use, so that they would start pushing the change from the lowest possible level. What did you do as a leader to really inform that or ensure that?
So I truly shared, and first of all, I promote a culture here internally where we celebrate failure. I truly believe that. I like to tell people I've raised 2 children, right? I have a 23 and a 24-year-old today. And you learn much more by failing fastly than you do by never trying and never failing. I think so having a culture where I don't punish individuals for failing, but also sharing as we've kind of built this together. I was lucky that most of the team was on board as we were starting to implement a lot of these things, but also told them, hey, we're going to try this, right? So I'm not saying I have all the answers. We're going to try this. And if this doesn't work for your particular team, or this doesn't work for the organization as a whole, then we'll stop and we'll try something else, right? And I think that helps to let people know, number one, right, I'm not going to get yelled at if I do something wrong, but also they had a part in making a lot of these decisions.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you for that. Next question comes from David. Can you talk about some of the hurdles or resistance to change that you encountered along the way and how you overcame those challenges?
So I'll be truthful and honest. I have not overcome them all yet, but I'm persistent. So most of my challenges aren't internal to my team. I think I have a direct line to our DAS. I have a lot of support from leadership here in REAC and in PIH. But like I said, HUD is very siloed. We still exist as kind of those 4 or 5 agencies that were smashed together. I always forget, it was either the 50s or 60s, I think, to create HUD, right? And they still kind of function in those silos, inclusive of CIO, right? So I can't be successful without the production support as well as CIO support on a development, lower environment perspective, like Azure Access. They do all the provisioning. We use Jira and Confluence here in our teams to do communications. All the teams that are doing Agile use those tools. And so it really requires me to get out of my comfort zone and collaborate with CIO on a lot of those aspects. But I think persistence is probably the best thing I could say. There's always going to be hurdles internally, externally, but I'm kind of like an old dog with a bone. I'm just not going to let it go. I'm going to keep fighting for what I want or what my team needs, and I keep going until we get those tools and those processes that are going to help us move forward.
Yeah, next question comes from Derek. Are you using Jenkins to build and deploy your developed application code?
So we are absolutely using Jenkins. We are starting integration as far as the build piece of that, but not to deploy yet. Like I said, HUD is still pretty behind from a technology perspective, and so we're dragging them kicking and screaming into this 20th century. I would love to get to a point where Jenkins could do the deployments. Right now, deploys are still manual with us into our production environment, as well as manual scripts for testing once the deployments are done. I'm hoping to be there. We're in a good place right now. Probably by next year, we might be able to do our first test deployment with Jenkins.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kevin. Next one comes from Tristan. You mentioned that you have testers integrated into each team. Are they responsible for writing the automated tests, or are the developers writing the automated tests with coaching from the tests or testers?
So let me answer that question 2 ways. My personal preference would be that the testers are there to help coach all the developers in writing those automated tests. We've even tried to implement a little TDD, right, test-driven development. And but as you would expect, right, a lot of that testing does fall back on the testers because of their requisite skill sets. But it's something that I challenge them in their annual performance reviews, right, is I don't want them just writing all the tests for the team. They're there to help coach and mentor other developers to strengthen that skill set, right? Writing better tests means better code.
Great, and I'm seeing a question from Derek here. The Dimensions tool has the ability to merge. Could it be that the feature is disabled?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I didn't mean to implement or to imply that Dimensions can't support code merging. It is HUD's implementation of Dimensions that severely limits that tool's capabilities. And if I had to guess, probably the version of the Dimensions that we're running. I'm sure it's several iterations behind. But we do a lot of things in this organization, I think, because people are comfortable with it, or we have teams that are comfortable with a particular process, and not because it's the right or the smart way to do things.
Kevin, another question I had was, are there any issues with you pushing change, especially since it was started kind of organically or locally there within REAC? Really ensuring that senior leadership understands what it is and the benefits from adopting Agile and DevOps. Did you have any challenges that way?
Definitely. So luckily not in my organization, so not at the REAC or PIH level. They've actually been very supportive of all the things that we're doing, including the fact that a lot of our business areas in REAC are also using Agile to manage day-to-day business. But because I have to then reach out and work with other parts of the HUD organization, that's kind of where the resistance is met. I know OCIO 3 or 4 years ago, our CIO is actually a political. So we had the CIO at the time tried to implement Agile, but tried to do it from the top down, right? Created an Agile policy and said, thou shalt do this. Obviously that didn't work, and that continues to be a hurdle for me, right? Trying to get that balance of what documentation is truly valuable when we get to a release or release review process, and what documentation is there just to check a box, right? Because HUD still likes waterfall. HUD still uses, from an organizational perspective, PPM v2, which has a quote unquote Agile thread, but the way they've implemented it isn't supportive of a true Agile iterative development cycle.
And a question coming in from Chris. We're struggling to get access to cloud resources. How did you get started on the cloud?
So we did some research. This was probably back in 2015. We did a cost-benefit analysis, actually. So we compared cost of on-prem servers versus, at the time, Azure, because that was one of the offerings that was coming up that we were hearing about from HUD. And we were able to show that it was a 50% cost reduction just in server costs. And we weren't even looking at things like not spinning up a test environment until it was needed. And we were still saving 50%. Interestingly enough, AWS was even cheaper. But it wasn't something we had to fight too hard for, because at the time it was something that the CIO was also trying to push, and we just kind of jumped on that bandwagon, and we were, you know, for all intents and purposes, their cheerleaders, saying, look how great this is, look at all the wonderful things we're able to do now. So it was through support of CIO that we were able to get cloud resources, and them standing up an enterprise architecture team. 2015, I think, was the first year enterprise architecture existed as part of the CIO organization.
Great. Kevin, thank you so much for answering those questions and your thoughtful answers on all of that. Sure appreciate it. And thanks for your time today. We're going to go ahead and finish up today. Alex just kicked out a survey in the chat, so we sure would appreciate if you all would fill that out. Also, feel free to invite others, your colleagues and coworkers, to this event. We'll be hosting it monthly. We're going to keep it, unless we hear otherwise through the survey, kind of fast and furious. Just get that information out there, have a bit of a Q&A, and I'd remind you all that, you know, keep the conversation going. If you're talking with folks back in your office over, you know, near the water cooler, and you've got more questions for Kevin afterward, you know, feel free to ping them. And last but not least, I'd love to have you all present at some point in the future. So if you'd like to present, just feel free to email me, brian.fox@gsa.gov, and Alex just posted that to the chat as well, and we'll get you lined up, and you can share what you've learned. Kevin was just talking about it, even the small failures, right? You've done some things and that didn't work out, but you learn from it. Also the big successes and the benefits you're seeing. You know, Kevin was just describing a rather conservative number of, you know, 50% savings, and they saw more than that. So anywho, this is for all of our benefit, so much appreciated. Thank you again, and we will look forward to having you all next month. Kevin, thanks again for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for dialing in.